Good evening, everyone. Welcome to ThinkTech's virtual meetups for the summer season, an initiative organized by the Saudi Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. ThinkTech aims to create a stimulating digital environment to spread awareness about emerging technologies through a series of virtual meetups. Today's session is about how technology is safeguarding health and livelihoods. My name is Malvina Tarazi, and I will be your moderator for today's session. I'm a partner with McKinsey Digital based out of Dubai, and I serve healthcare clients in the region on both digital and technology topics. With me are two colleagues out of our Asia region, Noshir and Yongmin, and I will turn it over now for them to do a brief introduction. Noshir, over to you.
Thank you, Malvina, and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Noshir Kaka. As Malvina said, I'm a senior partner with our practice in India. I currently run McKinsey's global analytics practice, and I co-lead our tech, telecom, and media practice. It is absolutely fantastic to be here with you today to share our perspectives on how technology is really reshaping both a pre-COVID and obviously living through and living with COVID world.
Thank you. My name is Jungmin. I'm also very honored to join this the virtual forum. I'm a partner with McKinsey Global Institute, MGI. So it is an internal think tank within McKinsey, and we focus on long-term, big agenda, that is shaping the global trends. And I'm based in Shanghai, and I focus on the technology and innovation agenda, especially in the context of Asia and emerging markets.
Thank you both. Noshir, I'm going to start with you. Over the last 6 months, we've seen how COVID has really impacted our lives and livelihood. We've also seen how the use of technology and digitization accelerated what we call the new normal. Can you give us your perspective on how technology has impacted key sectors in the economy?
Sure, Malvina. I think it's hard to think of either a sector, a government, or an individual that hasn't been impacted in the last 6, 7, 8 months from this pandemic. If I adopt 3 lenses, I'll adopt what the financial markets are saying, I'll adopt what different governments are doing, I'll adopt what we are seeing in consumers, and finally, I'll also adopt, I'll take a point of view around what we see as the the workforce of the nation. So if you look at the market or the financial markets, it's quite interesting, Malvina, that if you look between January and August of this year, we've actually seen in the midst of the pandemic, market capitalization, global market capitalization go up by about $5.8 trillion. And what is interesting is the concentration of where that market capitalization increase has gone. So almost 2/3 of that increase has gone to about 150 companies, which we would classify as either technology companies or technology-led companies. These are companies, obviously you see the major ecosystem players, the major technology players. You also see the major banks that have adopted technology. You see the retailers that are adopting technology aggressively, right? So interestingly, when you look at that, and that's an incredibly small number, right? I mean, 150 companies where the market, for whatever reason, has actually put a premium on those companies that are essentially using technology to essentially come out of this pandemic much better. So that's one lens, which is where markets. Governments are reacting across the world in very, very different flavors. And I'll just give you an example of the country that I'm in, India right now. NASSCOM, which is the National Association, put out a report about a month ago that says, just if you look at AI and the use of artificial intelligence and data, it could impact the Indian economy in 3 ways, at least. Number one, it could add 500 billion out of the 5 trillion aspiration that the Prime Minister has set for the economy by 2025. So almost 10% of the incremental growth of India could come from just one horizontal technology called AI. Second, obviously, we've seen countries and companies around the world use it to manage the pandemic, whether it's contact tracing or other applications. Jongmin will talk about a few of them a little later. It's incredible how. And finally, reskilling and talent. We're seeing governments massively push and institutions massively push in this virtual world for reskilling. So that's the second lens, which is what governments are doing. The third lens is how it's affected you and me as a consumer. Now, if I take a developed market view like North America, it's quite interesting to note, if you look at online e-commerce penetration in North America, in the US in particular, between 2009 and 19, that decade, the penetration of online commerce increased by 11 percentage points. In the first 6 months of this year, it increased 19 points. So effectively, if you look at digital commerce, we did nearly 1.5 to 2 times in the last 6 months what took an advanced economy like the US 10 years to do. And that's what we are seeing across the board with COVID. It is massively speeding up the trends that were already evident before COVID hit. And online purchase is just one of them. Another example is if you look across telecom, insurance, entertainment, or banking, between 10 and 20% of the net users today were first-time users into the online world, even in a market like the US, right? So that's an incredible perspective of change from a consumer lens, where you and I and everyone else around us are trying to do as much contactless as possible. And finally, my last view is the future of work. How has workforces changed? Now, if you look at some of our largest tech services companies in the world, they're essentially making a point that either they will not have employees, or in some cases, they will not have more than a certain percentage of employees ever back in their offices in the future. That's a very different environment when you actually then say, what does the future of the workplace look like? What does the operating model of a company and an institution and its workforce look like? So all 4 lenses are dramatically different, whether you look at the financial markets rewarding 150 companies disproportionately. You look at governments around the world leveraging AI and other technologies massively to leapfrog what they can do with their economies and their institutions. You look then at the consumer and you see this incredible shift in 6 months, what took us 10 years before that to do. And finally, you look at the workplace and you look at the future of work, the operating model of companies, and perhaps some of it will go back to a normal, but some of it perhaps will be hopefully into a better normal.
Thank you, Noshir. This is very, very insightful, and I love the way that you've sort of simplified it into four key buckets, highlighting the importance of technology effectively in the new normal, right? Whether it's how the market reacted, how governments are reacting, how we're changing the way we operate, and how effectively we as consumers have adopted and are doing things that we would have never done 6 months ago. That leads me into a key question that maybe I turn over to you, Jongmin. As we look at all these technologies, I know that you've been looking and mapping a lot of these emerging technologies. You've looked at north of 50 emerging technologies out there. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are the exciting ones? What are the ones that governments and financial markets and people and the workforce are reacting to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to build a forward-looking perspectives on the up and coming and emerging technologies, and we wish we had a crystal ball, but we don't either. So we took an analytical approach. So we applied two different lenses in terms of assessing the potential of technology. One is knowledge creation, largely based upon the intellectual property creation, and then second is the flow of the fund. How much VC is funding those technology, and what kind of IPOs are happening. Yes, we looked at over 30 different technologies. It will take a full day to talk through all of them, and today let me just highlight 5 of them. The first is digital commerce, which is also highlighted by Noshir. But then, to me, this is not a surprise at all, because shift from offline retail to online has been well underway over the past decade. But what is interesting is the additional waves. The first wave of online retail or offline retail to online is pretty much done, but the battleground is now shifting from this traditional e-commerce to somewhere else. And one of these new battleground is the mobile commerce, for example, which accounts for 60 to 80% of the total e-commerce in many countries. And that is because there's already more than 3 billion smartphone users in the world, and the number keeps growing, and also the exciting and interesting mobile ecosystem is rapidly evolving. And that mobile commerce again leads to another new battleground, which is social commerce, right? Because I'm sure you guys are also a heavy user of different types of social commerce platform. Typically consumers spend 2 to 3 hours on a social platform every day. And that means there's a lot of opportunity to monetize that access to consumer, and as a result, social shopping platforms are rising rapidly. I don't know if you heard of this platform called Pinduoduo, PDD. It's a very rapidly growing platform, and at some point the founder of PDD, the wealth of the founder of the PDD was larger than the founder of Alibaba, and that became a big issue, right? So that shows the rapid growth of this new battleground. And also another interesting battleground related to the commerce is live streaming. So these days, ordinary people, you and I, or anyone on this streaming, can also become a celebrity, because anyone can open up their own channel and try to sell something. And for example, there's also one very famous influencer in China. He sold 15,000 lipstick in just 5 minutes, right? And this live streaming commerce is booming because it's fun and interactive, right? It is not just one-way sales activity. You can do a lot more storytelling and the Q&A and direct interaction. So that's the first technology, right? So that is interesting, and also is becoming increasingly interesting. Second technology is fintech, which is extremely critical, especially in the context of financial inclusion. And in many cases, the starting point is digital payment, like the likes of PayPal, Paytm, and Alipay. They have been in the market for a while, because they are solving the consumer's pain points of not having credit history, and it is evolving. So, for example, digital-only banks are emerging in Singapore or Korea or China, and they offer very competitive service in terms of deposit and lending and real-time reporting and 24/7 in-app customer services and so on. So they are gaining popularity. They are shaking up the competitive landscape of traditional banking sector. And that is also evolving into wealth management, right? Because these fintech companies, they own the data, they own the customer relationship. So they take advantage of those insight and data, and sell a tailored wealth management product to consumers, right? And in many cases, those services are enabled by robots and AI, and that generates a lucrative fee stream for these companies. So that's the second technology. Third technology is healthcare, right? Especially in terms of delivering the low-cost solution to people, and especially during the COVID, the telemedicine boomed because the potential patients didn't want to go to the hospital. Hospitals didn't want to take the patients, And also in some countries, the government allowed telemedicine as part of their reimbursement scheme. So, if you look at some of the interesting platforms like WeDoctor, Good Doctor, and How Daifu in China, their the usage, the monthly active users surged. So there was a booming of telemedicine, and also more broadly well-being and fitness solutions, right? So that is also widely offered by many fitness and sports companies. They also increased a lot, right? And they were building community, right? And also started gaining popularity. So that's the third technology. Fourth technology is education tech, ed tech, right? So if you think about the schools and the way they teach and students learn, there has been virtually very limited change over the past several hundred years. But again, as Noshir mentioned, the COVID has accelerated a lot of changes, and in this case, remote learning, right? So the teaching and learning model, challenges the boundary. And also at the same time, there are also lots of new solutions emerging. For example, in terms of the content generation, right? So now anyone can be a teacher, right? So and there are platforms to democratize the teaching. So if you have some specific knowledge, right? Whether that's an Excel shortcut or assembling of furniture or playing musical instruments or deep insights on certain part of the history, you can open a class and you can teach the audience, right? And then you can make money out of it. So that's the content generation. And also in terms of content delivery, right? So machine learning and AI solutions, they can offer, personalized contents and training program. And AR and VR, they are enhancing the efficiency of teaching at the classroom as well. So there has been a potential to adopt hybrid model in the other schools as well. So that's the fourth technology. Fifth technology is about digital manufacturing and supply chain. So up to those four, it is largely about B2C, but also B2B or business processes. There has been also changes and also great potential in the future. So we also ran a global survey of executives, and because of COVID, because of some geopolitical situation, 93% of those executives are saying that supply chain resilience matters, and one way to enhance the resilience is through digitization. And our survey says that 67% of the executives are saying they accelerated the automation and adoption of AI because of the COVID, and 36% of the executives are saying that they also accelerated the adoption of digital supply chain because now they need to have visibility not just on tier 1 supplier, but tier 2 and tier 3, so across the value chain. So those 5 technologies are the areas where we can also pay attention to over the coming decade.
Thank you, Jong-min. A lot of I think the insights that you've seen in Africa sort of resonate in the region as well. Obviously, the level, we're maybe a year or two behind in some cases, but in many cases, we're seeing similar patterns. If we look at banking, for example, mobile banking has become the norm. Every bank has that as a digital first offering. We see a lot of banks that are sort of shutting down their physical branches to go to mobile banking. Same thing around telemedicine. We saw a lot of adoption during COVID. Governments went out of their way to ensure that those things are covered by insurance. And once you do that, it's difficult to go back. So I think the expectations of a lot of the consumers are, they want to see more and more of this digital health offerings out there. And then the other interesting thing you mentioned around digital commerce. We see a lot around mobile commerce. We're not as mature in this part of the world yet around the social commerce and all the aspects that you are seeing in Asia. But I suspect we're not too far behind. There are a number of fairly high-profile influencers in the region, and I think that will continue to see a bit of that in the region as well. So thank you very much for your insights. I think it's great to see how similarities resonate across the world. Maybe switching gears a little bit, and I'm going to ask this question, and I'll start with Noshir, and then I'll hand it over to Jungmin, to get your perspective as well. If we look at, now that we understand those sort of the opportunities and some of the areas of focus from a technology perspective, what should companies be looking at in terms of opportunities? What should they be focusing on from your perspective? And I'll start with Jungmin, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, and we think that there are still plenty of opportunities going forward. And let me highlight 2 of them, and Noshir will highlight more important ones as well. So the first one is reimagining consumer experience, right? So a lot of technologies that I described was also related to the lives of consumer, but still we think that there are still plenty of pain points that are still unaddressed, right? And plenty of unmet needs around the lives of consumers, whether that's commerce, finance, mobility, real estate, you name it, right? And so there will be continuous offering across those around those pain points by different industry verticals or categories, right? So that's first opportunity related to consumer, but then it will not stop there, right? So at the same time, there will be so-called horizontal expansion of those players and platforms across different verticals and industries, and so the so-called the rise of super apps, right? So for example, Alipay or WeChat in China, or Gojek in Indonesia, or Kakao in Korea, or Jio in India, right? So they are not just a single app, right? So they offer multiple digital services and they touch multiple aspects of consumer lives, right? And basically, they offer everything related to the consumer's life. So it's not an app. It is a lifestyle platform, right? And that means they collect a lot of data set, right, on the other consumers, and they were able to form a so-called 360 view or 360-degree view on consumers, and so the power of data, right? So that means they can maximize their network effect and monetize those data to upsell and cross-sell, and also even use the data for the more exciting innovation in the future. We don't know what they will be, but this data is the new oil or new blood or new water, whatever the important thing in our life or in the economy is, right? So that horizontal expansion of platforms, that's another exciting opportunities that companies need to pay attention to. And also it is not just the consumer facing part of the process that is getting digitized, also the back end, right? So we expect that a lot of digitization of the entire consumer related value chain will happen. For example, in retail space, the go-to-market that involves inventory management, sourcing and logistics, and payments with the distributors can be also digitized a lot more. So the overall productivity and efficiency can go up in the entire sector. So that is one big opportunity. So reimagining the consumer experience or consumer journey. Second, big opportunity is the managing energy transition. So there's a lot of debate on the climate change. It is a big topic, and our view is that it is important and it is real. And globally, based upon our simulation, maybe about $4 to $6 trillion of GDP may be at risk, right, because of the decreasing labor productivity in outdoor industries alone, right? And then so-called the ocean warming, may put up to 800 million people relying on fishing at risk as well. And then the lethal heat waves may put up to 200 million people in India at risk. So it's going to substantially affect the livability and workability of the people around the world. And it's going to affect the financial sector as well, right? So because of the climate risk, it'll make the long duration borrowing unavailable, and that's going to create some uncertainty on insurance and also reduce the terminal value, and that can also trigger capital reallocation or changes in asset pricing. And for example, our simulation suggests that in Florida, because of flooding or the potential losses from flooding, may lead to 15 to 35% of the value of the homes or the properties, right, in the affected area, right? So in short, energy transition matters, and good news is that the transition toward cleaner forms or renewables has been happening. Now the cost of those renewables has been quite competitive. So for companies, they can think about two directions, right? In terms of opportunity, first is diversify their current portfolio toward more renewable or cleaner form of energies, and especially in Europe, we've seen some successful cases from transitioning from fossil fuel company or oil refinery to more cleaner or renewable portfolio. So that is one opportunity, and another opportunity is removing carbon from the entire value chain, and in doing so, companies can also explore new technologies such as carbon capture storage or smart grid, smart meters, and so on. So technology can be also a solution to reduce the carbon as well. So second opportunity is about managing energy transition, and Noshiro will talk a lot more insightful opportunities as well.
Thank you, Jong-min. Before I switch over to Noshir, I just had a follow-up question for you. You talked a little bit about the rise of the super apps and how we can leverage the data and what have you. Maybe if you could share a perspective on the world of omni-channel, right? How do I transition from an offline to an online? Is this something that's relevant, or is effectively the offline dead, or is there a world where the two can coexist, if you will? And maybe talk a little bit about what you've seen, in Asia. We hear a lot in the US of companies ceasing to exist because they don't transform. So very interested to see your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a very difficult question to answer. Probably the future is the merge of the two, right? So in China we call it O2O or OMO, right? So online to offline, offline to online, or online merging offline. Because if you take the customer's perspective, they just want a seamless, excellent services, whether they buy online or offline, right? And then also, if you look at the emerging, the winning, companies, they are basically integrating those two channels, right? You can order online and pick it up offline, or you can go offline and then make it delivered to the online. And many offline stores these days, they also have online channel, right? So one famous example is Hema store, the hip fresh food store that Alibaba is driving. The conventional wisdom was that the fresh food like lobster or fish, vegetables, it'll be difficult to do online, but they are doing it. They are doing it in a very successful way, and so out of their offline store, majority of their revenue is coming from actually their online businesses. So. And also the maturing of the delivery network, right? That helps, right? So for offline stores that don't have enough scale to build delivery network, they can simply tap on the power of the delivery platform, so that they can also become a competitive player on the online world as well. So eventually, probably it is likely to merge.
A lot of the things you talked about around optimizing supply chain becomes very, very relevant, right? In this new world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Let me switch over maybe to Noshir and give you an opportunity to talk about a couple of the industries and what you've seen there.
Sure. So I think where we just picking up from where Jungmin was, I think what I'd say is that we see a whole range of opportunities across industries, which are both horizontal.
I think we've lost Noshir. Jungmin, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
All right. Can we talk a little bit? You mentioned moving into effectively the
Playing from Anaya's MacBook Pro.
Sorry. Noshir, do we have
My
you back?
apologies. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, over back to you, Noshir.
Thank you. Sorry, there are still some things you can't do remotely, like fix the bandwidth. But as I was saying, we see vertical opportunities and we see horizontal opportunities. In fact, we've profiled over 400 of them. Let me just take a few to give you an example. So in retail, in addition to omni-channel retail, e-commerce, we're seeing a concept of store of the future. So this is not just about curbside pickup or contactless payment and so on. We're actually seeing dark stores come into existence and grow for the first time. We're seeing shifts like what Jungmin described with Alibaba stores, right? Where actually years of conventional wisdom would have said you can't do fresh online, right? We're seeing those change. If you go all the way to the extreme, you go to the shop floor, we're also seeing the shop floor of the future, where we're seeing companies rethink completely because of social distancing and spacing requirements, how they can actually automate entire parts of their facilities, how they can actually protect their workforce by using AI-enabled cameras to ensure that social distancing is actually maintained. We're seeing companies put in biometric markers that allow you to actually do virtually everything contactless. In insurance, for example, so that was manufacturing, right? Workforce of the future or shop floor of the future. If you look at insurance, for the first time, you have insurance salespeople who cannot actually visit their clients, who cannot physically meet their clients as often as they did. So what does virtual B2B or B2C selling become? And to give you an insight into that, many specialized B2B firms are thinking, do we need to have geographic sales teams anymore? And because historically, you would always have a team located geographically so that you could go and reach the customer, build the relationship, and so on. But today, when the customer is essentially on a TV screen, could you actually change your structure of the sales force in such a way that you actually deliver expertise and specialization at the point which the customer needs? So, for example, if Jungmin has bought a lovely house and wants a special insurance policy, and I want to renew the auto claim for my car, or I want to get some other specialized plant and machinery insurance, it doesn't need to be the same person. It shouldn't, in fact, be the same person. It can be expertise-led as opposed to geography-led. Right? That's an example from insurance. So I gave you three very different verticals. So retail, store of the future; manufacturing, shop floor of the future; insurance or any other B2B entity, selling of the future. Right? And each of these are fundamentally going to actually change in some ways and accelerate the trends that we have. We also see horizontal opportunities. These are, Melvina, opportunities that go across industry. So cybersecurity defense, cloud migration and cloud adoption, supply chain resilience. These are actually spanning across multiple sectors. And if you think about your supply chain resilience piece, it's not just resilience from the trade wars and all of that that's going on. It's actually resilience today from actually parts of your supply route being shut down because of COVID or any other disaster that Jongmin also referred to. So actually now we're seeing a whole host of new horizontal opportunities coming about within those, across those industries. So that's where I would go, Malvina, which is they're very specific vertical opportunities, which is by industry, and you can look at them and see them. And there's a whole range of horizontal. Put together, there are almost 400 opportunities that we see, that at least we have profiled, and probably we've not profiled all of them. There are probably many more that we haven't, that companies, institutions, governments, NGOs can all go around and actually capture. So we think that there is a real opportunity in front of us to take forward.
Thank you, Noshir. I think this is a great segue into listening to you. And you talked about 3 different industries that are somewhat different, but then this big notion of an ecosystem, and how do I bring industries that are slightly different flavor, and how do I go further down the down the value chain? So we talk about a bank today to facilitate their mortgage journey, integrating with a home builder, right? We see an insurance company to facilitate more services to their members, go into a wellness program, right? So you see a lot of these different industries that are going into different services that may be adjacent and may be complementary, and something that I think in the past we did not see, right, before the advent of these ecosystems and these digital ecosystems. Maybe you can offer a bit more perspective on what you've seen. I know a lot of this in Asia is dominant, if you will.
And yes, absolutely. And Jongmin referred to several of these ecosystems in his earlier comments. And Melvina, what's happening is we are seeing a phenomenon we call sectors without borders. So for all of our existence up to this point, I think we knew what a bank looked like. We knew what an insurance company looked like. We knew what a healthcare provider looked like. I'm not sure that at least I know what it looks like anymore, because I get financing from places that I probably have never met me, have never seen me, but they probably can assess my credit risk more accurately than my bank. As I said, I buy a policy from a person I've never met, which I would have never done in my life before, and so on and so on, so forth, right? So I think what's happening is that entire businesses and sectors, those silos which we used to have, where we used to call hard boundaries between each sector, are vanishing because essentially of a few of these horizontal technologies, namely primarily the advent of data and AI. So if you look at the heart of these ecosystems, it's the fact that they actually understand me as a consumer, you as a consumer, Jongmin as a consumer, much better than, frankly, our historical siloed providers used to, right? So they would know typically what I would prefer to buy or my preferences, and therefore they're able to adjust and adapt to them extraordinarily fast. And with a personalization level that is just very, very hard to match if you don't have those digital tools at your hand. Partly that is what is seen, that rise in 150 companies becoming these giants in market capitalization that I referred to in my opening comments, right? So that is the old story. We've seen that play out in what we call the B2C ecosystems. And we've seen that play out and has played out across many countries. Of course, some are more focused and some are more all-encompassing, as Jungmin said, as an all-in-one app. What we haven't seen play out as yet at that scale, and where I think the next $1 trillion opportunity is actually the B2B side.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've never seen that level of personalization as yet on the B2B side. And I think that it's actually on the way. It's already here in some places, right? And that will be the next frontier where we will see these sector boundaries just completely crumble. And you'll find as you rightly said, right, a car dealer, a bank, an insurance company, a driving school, and a whole host of other things actually getting together and providing an offering that we never had before this.
Great. Yeah, this is very, very exciting. It's all about where the value pools are and how do I extract value out of my entire value chain. So it's very, very interesting. Given all these opportunities, if you will, and everything that's sort of changing and rapidly changing in our world, this rapid digitization, the breaking down of sector boundaries, the demand of the consumer, the amount of data that we have, how do we get our leaders? How do we help them sort of lead the way? What are the kind of things that they need to focus on, and what should they be looking at, right? As they start to steer their companies to take advantage of all of the stuff that's going on. So maybe I start with Jungmin, and then get a few of your perspectives, and then switch over to Mushir.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So let me share 3 keywords, that that the leaders, may need to keep in mind. The first keyword is speed. So as Noshir mentioned, COVID is a big accelerator, right, or sometimes an amplifier of the pre-existing trends, and it is resetting the pace of innovation, the pace of the reform, and everything, right? So therefore, as a leading company, you probably, these leaders need to think about how they can adapt to the new clock speed of the innovation and competition. And our observation is that some of these leading companies or winning companies, they can make changes overnight, if I exaggerate a bit, right? And in China at least, and I've seen some cases of redeploying people, offline salespeople, to online, or embracing new remote working model, or introducing new digital channels through WeChat. They happen, that they make it happen in a matter of days, right? So not weeks, right? And probably the 150 companies that Noshir mentioned, they are very nimble and digitally capable to quickly adapt to these changes. And also, it was not unusual to see some of the companies, doubling or tripling their revenue, during the COVID situation. So, the first keyword that all of us need to keep in mind is speed. The second keyword is collaboration. So there could be different types of collaboration. And one type of collaboration is between public and private. And Noshir talked about the role of the government in the opening statement. And in order to deal with this kind of national crisis, right? So you need the power of everyone. All stakeholders need to commit and contribute and help. And in some countries, public sector really stepped up, right? So if you look at the size of the fiscal stimulus of G20 countries, that is 4.5 times larger than that of the 2008 packages. And in many economies, government has been heavily mobilizing resources, and also sometimes facilitating new changes such as data sharing and so on and so on. So the public sector is playing a very big role. In other cases, private sectors stepped up. In case of China, I need to have my QR code in order to enter a building or take some transportation and so on. So without the contribution of private sector, especially the tech players, it would have been impossible to roll that out nationally. So public sector stepping up, private sector stepping up, that means going forward, there could be a lot of interesting and important opportunities in terms of the collaboration between the two. Another collaboration area is with the ecosystem player, that is rapidly growing. Noshir mentioned, sectors without borders. So there could be also collaboration opportunities across across other companies in the sector, right? And there are many areas in terms of data gathering or the marketing or innovation, supply chain, and so on. So how you can be part of this this big and expanding digital ecosystem and make advantage of that, right? So that is also another area of collaboration that companies need to pay attention to. So the second keyword is collaboration. Third keyword is resilience. We already talked about the digitalization of manufacturing and supply chain. And another important trend is regionalization. So regionalization is also an important way of increasing the resilience, because it can create a shorter and faster local and regional supply chain, and that gives more flexibility to companies. And also, given the global volatilities, this regional collaboration can also give some scale for companies in order to survive and navigate a multipolar world. So the third keyword is resilience.
So Malvina, if I may add on to that, and I'll take a little bit of a personal lens. So if you're a leader in this world, what are the 5 questions you should be asking yourself, and at least in my view, and this is just one person's view. So the first one is, are you really taking a long-term view of your industry or sector and its ecosystem? Right? Are you really thinking about where your consumer and your sector is likely to go as opposed to where it is today? Second question. Everyone today has a digital strategy. Almost no entity that I speak to, no CXO will say they don't have one or they are not building on their previous one, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very few of them scale. And very, very few of them answer the question, is your digital strategy or blueprint or plan creating economic value versus a digital attacker? Not versus your closest at-home competitor that you've competed with all through your life, but against a digital ecosystem or an attacker. Does your strategy stand out? Third, the point that Jongmin said, which is, how frequently do you allocate and reallocate your technology talent and capital? The speed of that allocation and reallocation is going to make a big difference to your competitive advantage. The fourth, for every dollar that you invest, or real or rupee or whatever it is that you invest in getting to value, so building the dark store, creating the safe factory floor, whatever it is, are you investing that equal amount in capability building? In capability building of your people through talent, in capability building of your data infrastructure through actually cleaning and managing and maintaining your data sets, in actually investments in technology and method. We think these 4 capabilities, talent, data, technology, and method or protocol, are absolutely foundational to you for you to scale. And my last and 5th question, which is a very personal question: when did you take your last course? Many of us leave learning behind in college or school or whenever we stopped. In this world, you have to get accustomed to going back to actually taking a course, a lecture, and not just expecting that because you come to work or you work at a wonderful institution that you'll automatically learn. So Those are the 5 questions. 1, are you taking a long-term view of your industry and the ecosystem around it? 2, does your strategy actually deliver a competitive advantage against an attacker? 3rd, how frequently are you reallocating your technology talent and capital? Your technology talent and capital, not the rest. 4th, are you investing in capability building as much as you're doing in hard infrastructure or assets? And lastly, for you personally, are you on a lifelong mission of learning? And when did you take your last course?
Thank you, Noshir. I worry about answering your last question, and I need to reflect on that. But I am intrigued by your second, I think your second question, which is about your digital strategy vis-a-vis a digital attacker. Are you able to elaborate a little bit more? I mean, if you look at our region here, we obviously have a lot of businesses that have grown over the last 20, 30 years in various sectors like retail and others. And what should they be looking at when they look at their digital strategy vis-a-vis a digital attacker? What are the set of questions they should be answering?
So, Navina, on that, it's actually not just the region. I'd say it's true for the world. I'll give you 3 statistics which are in my mind scary and shocking. So the 3 numbers to remember are 90, 17, 17, and 2. 90, 17, 2. So this comes from a survey that we did, one of the largest surveys of CXOs on the topic of digital. So when asked, do you believe, even before COVID, that digital was going to fundamentally change the economic future of your industry, your segment, your geography? 90+% of CXOs said yes. All right, 90%. When asked, have you moved your management and technology resources in line with that first aspiration? Only 17% said yes. And then when asked, have you actually scaled your digital strategy, plan, initiatives, roadmap? That's the last most dismal number. It's somewhere between a low of 2 and a high of 8. So 90, 17, 2 is the state of play for most of the world. And of course, there are pockets that are ahead or behind in some cases. But that's the state of play. Now, if you look at that, so everyone's got it. Everyone's got religion that this is important. They've got to do something about it. So that first fault line, 90 to 17, why does that occur? That typically occurs because you haven't found or you haven't articulated where the value is. Where is the business value of digital? You often come at it from a technology solution or a pain point that is addressing one part, right? So for example, if I said, I want contactless payments, that is what we call a use case. A customer does not buy contactless payments. The customer buys a seamless omni-channel experience. So the first thing is to be very clear of where value exists in your industry, where are the value pools, as you called it. And that's often that first gap. The reason people don't allocate resources is not because they don't believe that there's a train coming on to hit them. It's just because they don't know how to do it or where to do it. That's the first gap. Start business back, value back. Don't start technology forward, you'll get lost. Then 17 to 2. 17 to 2 is all that I described to you around the capability building. The 4 sets of capabilities you must build. Talent to start with, right? Have you sent your management team back to an academy or a college or a campus? Have they actually learned how to do AI or how AI can actually implement and inflect their businesses? Because not all of us went to school and college probably 20, 30, 40 years ago. And we never had the opportunity to study the latest technology in AI. And suddenly, because you're a leader, everyone expects you to understand it. Well, we don't. So number 1, your talent pool has to be reskilled. Second, data. Many companies don't answer the question or cannot answer the question, what are my most valuable data sets? And today I would argue your top 30 data sets are as valuable as your top 30 premises around the world. So if you had a factory or you had a store or you had a whatever it is, right? You would know who the head of your factory is. But I still don't have many clients coming to me and saying, I know which are the 30 most important data sets for me. Same for technology and same for method. Method is a protocol, just like we had Lean or Six Sigma, a method to do this. There needs to be a method for digital transformations. So 90, 17, 2, the fourth line of the first typically tends to be you haven't actually found value. You don't know where to look. You haven't pointed the ship in the right direction. And the 17 to 2 occurs typically because you haven't built the capability, or you haven't built the execution muscle to get it right.
Thank you, Noshir, for that. I'm going to remember these numbers now for a very long time. I'm just cognizant of time. Maybe Jong-min, I'll leave a few minutes for you for final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up this session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So today we talk a lot about the opportunities, right? And of course, why waste the crisis, right? So Noshir said 17% and 2%, right? So it's because of COVID, we can reset the pace of innovation and overcome the inertia. In many cases, all this majority of the digital transformation goes to limbo. But it's not now time to get it back from the limbo and send to heaven, right? So that is one thought. Another thought is again, we talk a lot about opportunities, but we shouldn't forget that this COVID is also a humanitarian challenge, right? So I personally went through 14-day quarantine in Shanghai when I fly back from Korea. It was a very painful experience, but then there are a lot of people in the world, going through, tragic, situations. So, all of us hopefully, can, collaborate and commit to the development of solution, for the region and for the world.
Thank you, Jong Ming. Noshir, 1 or 2 minutes to wrap up, and we'll call it a night.
No, thank you. I would firstly echo Jong-min's point of view, which is this is at the end of the day also a human and humanitarian crisis, and there's no amount of logic or facts and so on that can ever take out the images that we've seen over the last 6-7 months. So I think that's the first thing, which is technology can play a very, very big role in helping us actually manage this crisis as well. I just hope you've taken away a few stories from this that we've said. One, we started out talking a little bit about the opportunity. There's almost limitless opportunity if you start reimagining the industry as you think about it. We talked about government opportunities, we talked about industry opportunities, we haven't talked about social sector opportunities, but massive amount of social sector opportunities as well. And finally, just the importance is of learning, right? The one thing that has changed pre-COVID or even with COVID is that we are all being forced to learn much faster. And so, Melvina, the funny story is, I started a Python programming class with my daughter. Both of us took it together, and actually after a few weeks, I was completely humiliated because she was just so much better than me. Right? So the next generation is doing it. And I think the leaders of this generation need to actually catch up, if anything.
For sure. And I echo your story of the next generation being agile enough to pivot in the new world. And I think what we've learned over the last 6 months or so is the ability of the human to change, right? And to pivot and to innovate and to look for new ways, and I think that's what gives us hope. And we now have a lot of technology and digital aspects that allows us to to move this forward. So again, thank you very much both. I appreciate your time. This has been amazing session, and I thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.